First class isn't for people like you." The words hung in the air of Sky Global Flight 843 as senior flight attendant Vanessa Wilson stood over Dr. Imani Reynolds, arms crossed, smirk firmly in place. What Vanessa didn't know was that in exactly 20 minutes, those 7 words would cost her career ground every Sky Global plane worldwide and cost the airline $1.4 billion in market value, all because she chose the wrong black woman to disrespect. Before we dive deeper into this true story of power prejudice and cosmic justice, drop your city in the comments. Have you ever witnessed discrimination on a flight? Let me know below and hit that subscribe button if you believe in accountability for everyone, no matter what uniform they wear. The polished marble floor of JFK International Airport's Terminal 5 reflected the rushed footsteps of travelers hurrying to their destinations. But Dr. Imani Reynolds was an island of calm. She sat in a plush armchair in the Sky Global Summit Lounge, sipping sparkling water. Her gaze fixed on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner being prepared at Gate D17. This was her flight, Sky Global 843, to London Heathrow. Imani was exhausted. The past 72 hours had been a grueling marathon of negotiations in New York, securing a 9-figure deal for her company Reynolds Avionics. Her technology, a revolutionary new logistical and safety protocol codenamed Nova system, was set to be integrated across Sky Global's entire global fleet. She was quite literally the architect of their future. She was dressed for a 7-hour overnight flight, not a boardroom. A charcoal gray cashmere sweatsuit, pristine white sneakers, and a pair of simple diamond studs. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. To the discerning eye, her outfit whispered quiet, expensive comfort. To the undiscerning, she was just a black woman in sweats. When the boarding call for first class began, Imani gathered her carry-on, a well-worn leather briefcase containing proprietary Nova System hardware, and made her way to Gate D17. The line was short, a slick man in a suit, a couple in matching beige linen, and then Imani. The gate agent, a woman with a plastic smile and a name tag that read, Vanessa Wilson, scanned the suit's ticket. "Enjoy your flight, Mr. Henderson." Then it was Imani's turn. She held out her phone displaying the QR code for seat 1A. Vanessa Wilson didn't scan it. Her eyes flicked from Imani's face down to her sweatsuit and back up. "Honey," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with saccharine condescension. "First-class boarding has just begun. General boarding will be in approximately 45 minutes. Imani kept her voice neutral, though a familiar cold knot tightened in her stomach. "I am in first class, seat 1A. Vanessa's smile tightened, becoming a mask. "I'm sure you think you are, sweetie, but this line is for our premium passengers." She gestured over Imani's shoulder. "You'll need to wait back there." Imani didn't move. She pushed her phone closer to the scanner. "My name is Dr. Imani Reynolds. My seat is 1A. Please scan my ticket." With an exaggerated theatrical sigh, Vanessa zapped the phone. The scanner beeped green. "Approved." Vanessa's face soured as if the machine itself had betrayed her. She had been so sure the doctor title on the manifest didn't match the woman in the sweatsuit. Flustered, she snatched the small paper slip from the printer and thrust it at Imani. "Well, you'd think they'd enforce the dress code," she muttered, just loud enough for Imani to hear. Imani took the slip. She met Vanessa's gaze with a look as hard and clear as ice. "And you'd think they'd enforce basic professionalism. Clearly Sky Global is having issues all around." She walked past the fuming agent and down the jet bridge. She didn't know it yet, but the first shot had been fired. Vanessa Wilson, stinging from the rebuke, picked up the crew phone and dialed the purser on board. "Thomas," she whispered. "We've got a problem in 1A. She's got a chip on her shoulder. Keep an eye on her." The first-class cabin of the 787 was an oasis of muted grays and brushed metal. Imani settled into 1A, a spacious suite at the very front of the plane. She stowed her briefcase plugged in her noise-canceling headphones and closed her eyes, trying to exhale the tension from the gate incident. Minutes later, she felt a shadow over her. She opened her eyes. There stood Thomas Blackwell, 51, the head purser, flanked by Vanessa Wilson, who had apparently rushed aboard after her gate duties. Thomas's badge gleamed under the cabin lights, his demeanor professional but cold. "Dr. Reynolds." Thomas began, his voice smooth but devoid of warmth. "Yes, I'm afraid there's been a slight issue with your seating, Ms. Wilson at the gate tells me there was some confusion with your ticket, and our system shows a potential conflict for this seat." Imani sighed, pulling out her phone again. "There is no conflict. Here is my boarding pass. Here is my confirmation email. Here is my Sky Global Diamond Medallion number. I am in 1A. Vanessa, standing just behind Thomas, chimed in. "She was very aggressive at the gate, Thomas. Very hostile." "I was not," Imani stated flatly, her patience evaporating. "I was correcting her assumption that I didn't belong here." Thomas held up a hand. "Now, ma'am, let's not get agitated. The fact is we have another passenger, a Global Services member, who is also assigned to 1A. This was a blatant lie." The seat map on Imani's own app showed 1A as confirmed for her. "We're going to have to move you. Move me where there is a very comfortable seat in premium economy, 14B. Vanessa offered, her smirk returning. "You'll have extra legroom." This was the true insult. Not just a move, but a categorical downgrade, a public statement. You don't belong here. The other first-class passengers were beginning to stare. The man in 2B, James Henderson, the one in the suit from the gate, was watching intently, a small amused smile on his face. "I am not moving," Imani said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "I paid for this seat. My status entitles me to this seat, and I will not be relocated because you and your colleague have decided, based on nothing but my appearance, that I am a problem." Thomas's facade cracked. His politeness vanished, replaced by cold authority. "Ma'am, you are currently defying a flight crew instruction. If you continue to cause a disturbance, I will be forced to notify the captain and he will have you removed from this aircraft." A disturbance. Imani's voice rose, cutting through the cabin's hushed quiet. "I am causing a disturbance. I am sitting in the seat I paid for and you are harassing me. You are threatening me. You are discriminating against me. Now please return to your duties and leave me alone." "That's it," Vanessa snapped. "She threatened me. I'm not safe." Thomas nodded curtly. "Wait here." He disappeared toward the cockpit. Imani felt a wave of adrenaline. This was escalating far beyond a simple misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, malicious power play. She could feel the eyes of the other passengers, some annoyed at the delay, some smug, none sympathetic. She was completely, utterly alone. In the rear of first class, a young flight attendant named Elena Rodriguez, 26, watched the scene unfold, her stomach knotting with discomfort. Elena had joined Sky Global just 8 months ago, and while she was still learning the unwritten rules, something about this situation felt wrong. She glanced down at her tablet, scanning the passenger manifest. Dr. Imani Reynolds, 1A Diamond status. No flags, no notes, nothing to justify what was happening. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, First Officer Michael Donovan, 35, was reviewing the final pre-flight checklists when Thomas Blackwell knocked on the door. Captain Richard Baker, 54, a veteran with 30 years of experience and an ego to match, opened it. "What's the problem?" Baker barked, not looking pleased at the interruption. "Captain, we have a passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions," Thomas explained. "She's in a seat with a duplicate booking and she's become aggressive and hostile. Vanessa, our flight attendant, feels physically threatened." First Officer Donovan frowned slightly. Which passenger, he asked, looking at the manifest. 1A, a Dr. Reynolds. Thomas replied. Donovan's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. He recognized the name immediately. Reynolds Avionics, the Nova system, the entire reason their fleet was being upgraded. He glanced at Captain Baker, wondering if he'd make the connection. "I'll handle it," Baker growled, adjusting his uniform before stepping out of the cockpit. As the captain disappeared down the aisle, Donovan quickly pulled up the passenger manifest. There was no duplicate booking for 1A. Dr. Reynolds was correctly assigned. He hesitated, then reached for the aircraft phone, punching in a number for Sky Global Operations Control. Back in the cabin, Imani watched as Captain Baker approached, his face set in a scowl. His shoulders were adorned with 4 gold stripes, his demeanor projecting absolute authority and zero patience. "What's the problem here?" Baker demanded, addressing Thomas rather than Imani. Captain Thomas said, his voice now laced with fake victimhood. "This passenger, Dr. Reynolds, is refusing a crew directive. She's in a seat that has a duplicate booking, and she has become aggressive and hostile. Vanessa feels physically threatened." Captain Baker finally turned his steely gaze on Imani. He saw a woman in a sweatsuit glaring at him. He saw a problem holding up his departure. "Ma'am," the captain said, his voice a low rumble of absolute authority. "I am the captain of this aircraft. My primary responsibility is the safety and security of this flight. My crew reports that you are being disruptive and have threatened them. I don't care what your ticket says. I am ordering you to take the seat in premium economy, or you will deplane. There is no third option." Imani stood up slowly, her 5'9" frame meeting his gaze. She was a woman who designed systems that kept planes like this in the air. She was a woman who had navigated boardrooms full of men like him for decades. She was a woman who had learned that sometimes the quietest voice carried the most weight. "Captain Baker," she said, her voice steady and precise. "I understand your authority on this aircraft. I respect it. What I don't respect is how it's being misused. I have not threatened anyone. I have not been disruptive. I am simply refusing to be removed from the seat I booked and paid for because your gate agent and purser have decided I don't look the part." Baker's nostrils flared. "That's not your call to make. This is my aircraft, and when I give an order, it's followed. Period." "You haven't asked to see my boarding pass," Imani pointed out. "You haven't checked the manifest. You've simply taken their word that I don't belong here." "I trust my crew," Baker snapped. "Then your trust is misplaced," Imani replied. "Check the manifest. Verify my booking. Do your job properly before you use your authority to humiliate a passenger." Captain Baker's face reddened. "That's enough. Security will escort you off this aircraft." He turned to Thomas. "Call ground security." As Thomas moved toward the galley phone, Elena Rodriguez stepped forward, her heart pounding. "Captain," she said quietly, holding out her tablet. "I've checked the manifest. Dr. Reynolds is correctly assigned to 1A. There's no duplicate booking." Thomas froze. Vanessa's eyes widened in betrayal. Captain Baker glanced at the tablet, then brushed it aside. "That's irrelevant now. This passenger has become disruptive and uncooperative. My decision stands." Elena stepped back, her bold moment of courage crushed by the captain's dismissal. But she hadn't been the only one watching the manifest. In the cockpit, First Officer Donovan had confirmed with Operations Control that not only was Dr. Reynolds correctly booked, but she was flagged as a VIP, the CEO of Reynolds Avionics, the company behind the Nova system. He hurried down the aisle, trying to intercept the situation before it spiraled further. "Captain," he said, slightly out of breath, "I've just spoken with Ops Control. Dr. Reynolds is correctly assigned to 1A. There's no duplicate booking." Baker turned to him, irritation clear on his face. "This isn't about the seat anymore, Donovan. This is about a passenger who refuses to follow crew instructions." But Sir Donovan lowered his voice. "Dr. Reynolds is the CEO of Reynolds Avionics, the Nova system, the new safety protocol we're implementing fleet-wide. That's her company." For a split second, uncertainty flickered across Baker's face, but his pride won out. "I don't care if she's the Queen of England. On my aircraft, my word is law. Get her off my plane." Imani had heard enough. She reached for her phone, her movements deliberate and calm. "Captain Baker, I want to be very clear about what's happening. I am being removed from this flight not because of any safety concern, not because of any booking issue, but because your crew decided based on my appearance that I didn't belong in first class. That's discrimination, and there will be consequences." "Are you threatening me?" Baker demanded. "No, Captain. I'm informing you of reality." She pressed a button on her phone. "Sophia, it's Imani. Initiate protocol Omega shutdown. Authorization Reynolds Alpha 749 Theta Echo 3. The cabin fell silent. No one understood what had just happened, but something in Imani's tone made even Captain Baker pause. "Security is on their way," Thomas announced, returning from the galley. "Excellent," Imani replied, gathering her briefcase. "I'll save them the trouble and deplane voluntarily. But Captain Baker, remember this moment. In about 3 minutes, you're going to understand exactly what you've done." As Imani walked down the aisle toward the exit, Elena Rodriguez quietly slipped her a business card. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "This isn't right." Imani took the card without comment, her face a mask of composed dignity. As she reached the door, she turned back to face the cabin. For those of you who witnessed this and said nothing, ask yourselves why. For those who participated, prepare yourselves. And for Captain Baker, you might want to check with Operations Control. I believe your flight just got canceled. With that, she stepped off the aircraft and onto the jet bridge, leaving a confused and unsettled cabin behind her. Back inside, Captain Baker's radio crackled to life. "Flight 843, this is Operations. We have an urgent situation. Please respond." Standing alone on the jet bridge, Dr. Imani Reynolds took out her phone. Her hands were steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She wasn't shaking with rage. She was calculating with precision. "Sophia," she said to her chief technical officer. "Confirm protocol Omega shutdown. Dr. Reynolds." Sophia Alvarez's voice held surprise. "That's the emergency override. That would ground the entire I know exactly what it does. I designed it. Is the authentication complete?" A pause. "Yes, authentication confirmed." "But Imani, this will affect every Sky Global flight worldwide. That's over 300-400 aircraft." "Good," Imani replied, her voice ice cold. "They've demonstrated they can't safely operate without oversight. So they won't operate at all. System shutdown initiating. The lockout will engage in 3 minutes. Perfect. Now get me a competitor's ticket to London, first class. I have a meeting to keep." As she ended the call, Imani glanced back at the aircraft where Captain Baker was rushing to the door, his face a mask of panic. She smiled at him not with anger, but with the serene confidence of someone who knew exactly what was about to happen. Inside the plane, chaos was erupting. Captain Baker's radio had delivered the impossible news all Sky Global flights worldwide were being grounded due to a critical system failure. The Nova system was shutting down. "What the hell does that mean?" Baker demanded, storming back into the first-class cabin. "Who is that woman?" First Officer Donovan's face had gone pale. "Sir, I tried to tell you. Dr. Imani Reynolds is the CEO and founder of Reynolds Avionics. They developed the Nova system, the integrated flight system that runs our entire airline. Navigation, communication, passenger, manifest, fuel management, everything." So what? Baker snapped. "She can't just shut it down because she's upset." "Actually, sir," Donovan replied quietly, "according to our contract with Reynolds, Avionics, she can. There's a clause that allows them to suspend service if they determine the system is being operated in an unsafe manner." "Unsafe? This is ridiculous. Call operations back. Tell them to override it." "They can't, sir. The system requires Dr. Reynolds' personal authorization to restart. It's an encrypted fail-safe." The color drained from Baker's face as the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. Meanwhile, in Sky Global's Global Operations Center in Atlanta, screens began flashing red. The technical director stared in horror as system after system went dark. Not just communications or navigation, everything. "What the hell is happening?" he shouted across the room. A systems analyst looked up, face pale. "It's Nova. The entire backbone is shutting down. Every aircraft, every terminal, every system. Override it, I can't. This is an authorized shutdown with Reynolds' personal encryption key. We'd need her to restart it." On monitor after monitor, aircraft status indicators turned from green to yellow to red. In airports across 6 continents, gate agents stared at blank screens. In cockpits, mid-flight pilots watched as their advanced navigation systems reverted to basic backup protocols. No Sky Global aircraft would fall from the sky. Dr. Reynolds had designed the system with multiple redundancies for safety, but not a single new Sky Global flight would take off. The world's third-largest airline had effectively ceased to exist with the press of a button. On social media, the hashtag #SkyGlobalGrounded began trending within minutes. Back at JFK, Imani walked calmly to the Delta Airlines counter. "I need a first-class ticket on your next flight to London Heathrow." The agent smiled. "Of course. May I ask what happened with your Sky Global flight?" "They're experiencing technical difficulties," Imani replied with a small smile. "I suspect they'll be grounded for quite some time." As she was handed her new boarding pass, Imani's phone rang. The caller ID displayed Jackson Mitchell, Sky Global CEO. She let it go to voicemail. At Sky Global's headquarters, CEO Jackson Mitchell, 52, was in a state of controlled panic. Surrounded by executives and technical staff, he watched in disbelief as the company's operations ground to a halt in real time. "Get Dr. Reynolds on the phone," he demanded. "Whatever she wants, give it to her. We need that system back online." His assistant looked up nervously. "Sir, she's not taking our calls." "Then find her." "Where is she?" "According to our tracking, she's boarding a Delta flight to London." Mitchell cursed under his breath. "Get the corporate jet ready. I'm going to London." "Sir, we can't. All aviation systems are locked down. The corporate fleet uses Nova too." Mitchell closed his eyes, the full weight of the disaster hitting him. "How much are we losing every minute?" The CFO spoke up, his voice grim. "At current stock trajectory, about $700,000 per minute. Our shares are in free fall." Mitchell turned to his communications director. "What's the public narrative?" "It's bad, sir. Social media is exploding with accounts of what happened on Flight 843. Someone recorded the entire interaction. It's going viral." On the main screen, they pulled up the trending video. There, in high definition, was Captain Baker ordering Dr. Reynolds off the plane without checking her ticket, without verifying the manifest based solely on the word of Vanessa Wilson and Thomas Blackwell. "Oh my God," Mitchell whispered. "We're finished." Back on Flight 843, the passengers were being informed that their flight was canceled due to technical issues. As they began to deplane, the reality of what had happened spread through the cabin like wildfire. "That woman they kicked off, she shut down the entire airline," someone exclaimed, looking at their phone. James Henderson, the businessman who had watched the scene with amusement, now looked stunned. "She's the Reynolds behind Reynolds Avionics, the Nova system." Elena Rodriguez stood by the door helping passengers deplane. "Yes, sir. Dr. Imani Reynolds, the one our crew just humiliated and removed." Captain Baker, standing nearby, overheard this exchange. His face, once red with authority, now drained of all color. As the last passengers left the aircraft, Thomas Blackwell and Vanessa Wilson huddled in the galley, their earlier confidence replaced by mounting dread. "What's happening?" Vanessa whispered. Thomas showed her his phone. "We're trending. Sky Global racism is all over Twitter, and..." He swallowed hard. "We just got emails from HR. Immediate termination." "For what?" Vanessa cried. "We were just doing our jobs." for creating, and I quote, an unprecedented corporate crisis through discriminatory conduct and failure to follow verification protocols. Vanessa sank into a jump seat, the reality of what they'd done finally hitting her. She can't just shut down an entire airline because we asked her to move seats. Apparently, Thomas replied grimly she can. While Sky Global scrambled to contain the damage, Dr. Imani Reynolds was settling into her first-class seat on Delta Flight, a Delta aircraft bound for London. Unlike her experience with Sky Global, the Delta crew had welcomed her with genuine warmth and respect. No suspicious glances at her sweatsuit. No questioning of her right to be there. As the plane reached cruising altitude, Imani finally checked her voicemail. 27 messages, most from Sky Global executives begging her to restore the Nova system. The last was from CEO Jackson Mitchell himself. Dr. Reynolds. His voice sounded strained, desperate. Please call me back immediately. We need to discuss what happened. I assure you this incident does not reflect Sky Global's values, and those responsible have already been terminated. Please, the entire airline is grounded. Thousands of passengers are stranded. We need to resolve this. Imani deleted the message without responding. She would deal with Mitchell when she was ready. On her terms, not his. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sophia CNN breaking news. Sky Global stock down 28% and falling. Mitchell taking emergency flight to London on competitor airline. Estimated losses already exceed $1 billion. Imani nodded to herself. The message was being delivered. But this wasn't about revenge or financial damage. It was about forcing a reckoning, one that money alone couldn't solve. She opened her laptop and began drafting a document titled The Reynolds Protocol Structural Reform for Aviation Equity. Back at JFK, Captain Richard Baker sat alone in the pilot's lounge, staring at his phone in disbelief. His inbox contained a single message from Sky Global's chief pilot, immediate suspension pending investigation. Report to FAA hearing next Thursday. Baker's mind raced through the events of the past hour, searching for someone else to blame. That woman had tricked him. Vanessa and Thomas had misinformed him. First Officer Donovan should have been clearer about who she was. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had failed in the most basic duty of a captain to verify information before making decisions. Instead, he had relied on assumptions and bias, letting his ego override his judgment. His phone rang, the chief pilot calling. Baker answered his voice, hollow. Richard. What the hell happened out there? The chief demanded. It was a misunderstanding, Baker began weakly. A misunderstanding. You just cost this airline billions of dollars and possibly its future. The FAA is launching a full investigation. They're questioning whether you abuse your captain's authority as a pattern of behavior. That's absurd. I've been flying for 30 years, and in 30 seconds you destroyed your career. The recordings from the cockpit voice recorder have been pulled. Your dismissal of First Officer Donovan's warnings, your failure to verify the manifest, it's all there. You're done, Richard. The line went dead, leaving Baker in stunned silence. Meanwhile, at the Delta gate, Elena Rodriguez was making a decision that would change her life. Still in her Sky Global uniform, she approached the gate agent. Excuse me, I need to get on that flight to London. I'm sorry we're fully booked, the agent replied. Elena pulled out her company ID. I'm a Sky Global flight attendant. I was on flight 843 with Dr. Reynolds. I need to speak with her. It's important. The agent's eyes widened with recognition. You're the one who tried to help her. Elena nodded. Yes. And I have documentation of what happened. The falsified reports, the discriminatory practices. Everything. But I need to deliver it to Dr. Reynolds personally. The agent hesitated, then made a call. Minutes later, Elena was escorted onto the plane and directed to first class where Imani sat working on her laptop. Dr. Reynolds, Elena said hesitantly. I'm Elena Rodriguez. I was on your flight earlier. Imani looked up, recognition flickering in her eyes. The flight attendant who checked the manifest. Yes. I... Elena took a deep breath. I have something you should see. She handed Imani a tablet. These are internal communications about passenger profiling. It's been happening for months. Flight attendants identifying passengers who don't look the part and finding ways to remove them or downgrade them. There's a whole unwritten protocol. Imani took the tablet, her expression hardening as she scrolled through the messages. They call it code upgrade, targeting passengers who they think gained access to first class through illegitimate means. Elena nodded. It's never officially endorsed, but management knows. They track what they call passenger alignment, making sure the right kind of people are in premium cabins, and who decides who's the right kind. It's never explicitly stated, but... Elena gestured helplessly. You saw it yourself. Imani nodded slowly. Thank you for bringing this to me. This changes things. She looked at Elena curiously. Why are you doing this? You'll lose your job. I already did, Elena replied. They fired everyone involved with Flight 843. Even me, just for checking the manifest. But I can't be part of a system that treats people that way. It's wrong. Imani studied Elena for a moment, then made a decision. What would you say to joining Reynolds Avionics? We need people with integrity. Elena's eyes widened. Are you serious? Completely. But first, I need your help with something else. How would you like to help me redesign how airlines handle passenger verification? For the first time since the incident began, Elena smiled. I'd like that very much, Dr. Reynolds. As the plane continued toward London, Imani and Elena began working on what would become the core of the Reynolds Protocol, a new standard for aviation equity that would transform the industry. In Sky Global's emergency command center, chaos reigned. Engineers frantically typed at terminals running diagnostic after diagnostic. Can we bypass the authentication protocols, demanded the CIO. The lead systems architect shook her head. Impossible. The Nova kernel is signed with quantum-resistant encryption. Even if we had a supercomputer dedicated to breaking it, we'd need decades. What about the backup systems they're operating, but they're designed for emergency landings only, not normal operations? We can safely land everything in the air, but we can't take off, we can't route efficiently, we can't manage scheduling. On the main screen, a global map showed Sky Global aircraft as tiny red dots, each one operating on minimal systems. How long can we stay viable like this? The CIO asked quietly. Maybe 48 hours before we start breaching contractual obligations. A week before the financial damage becomes irreversible. The CIO closed his eyes, and Reynolds is the only one who can turn it back on yes. And according to her contract, she has every legal right to suspend service if she determines the system is being operated in an unsafe manner. Is discrimination unsafe? The architect gave him a level look. The contract specifically includes organizational culture issues that may impact safe decision-making. So yes, legally speaking, discrimination could trigger the safety clause. So we're not just morally wrong, we're contractually screwed. Precisely. CEO Jackson Mitchell sat in first class on a British Airways flight staring at his tablet in horror. Sky Global's stock had plummeted 34% in just 3 hours. The financial press was having a field day. Airline racism costs Sky Global $1.4 billion. And counting read one headline. How one CEO grounded an airline with a single phone call, declared another. His phone buzzed with a text from his communications director. Video of incident now at 8.2 million views. Hashtag flying while black trending worldwide. Celebrities posting their own stories of discrimination on Sky Global flights. Mitchell rubbed his temples. This was beyond a PR disaster. It was an extinction-level event for the company. Sky Global couldn't survive more than a few days without the Nova system, and Dr. Reynolds held all the cards. What made it worse was that Mitchell couldn't even argue she was wrong. The video evidence was damning. His own employees had profiled and humiliated the CEO of their most important technology partner and then doubled down when challenged. If the roles were reversed, he might have done exactly what she did. "Sir," a flight attendant interrupted his thoughts. "There's a call for you in the purser's station." Mitchell frowned. "A call? In flight?" "Yes, sir. It's coming through on our emergency channel." Mitchell hurried to the purser's station and took the handset. "This is Mitchell. Jackson." It was Imani Reynolds' voice, calm and measured. "I assume you're on your way to London to meet me." "Dr. Reynolds." Mitchell said, relief flooding his voice. "Yes, I'm on my way." "Look, I want to personally apologize for what happened. The behavior of our staff was inexcusable and they've all been terminated. Firing a few employees doesn't address the root problem, Jackson. You and I both know that." "Tell me what you want," Mitchell said desperately. "Whatever it takes to get the system back online. I'll be at the Savoy at 9 a.m. London time tomorrow. Bring your legal team and be prepared to sign a new contract. This isn't a negotiation. It's a list of requirements." "I understand. Whatever you want." "One more thing, Jackson. Bring your board's approval for a complete leadership overhaul. Your company doesn't just have a few bad apples. It has a culture problem, and that starts at the top." Before Mitchell could respond, the line went dead. Back on the ground, the ripple effects of the Sky Global shutdown were growing. At airports worldwide, thousands of passengers found themselves stranded as every Sky Global flight remained grounded. Competitors scrambled to add capacity, but couldn't come close to accommodating the overflow. In news studios, aviation experts and civil rights leaders debated the incident. Most sided with Dr. Reynolds, pointing out that her actions, while dramatic, had exposed a pattern of behavior that needed addressing. What Dr. Reynolds did was unprecedented, one analyst said, but so was Sky Global's response to her presence in first class. This isn't about one incident. It's about countless similar experiences that passengers of color face every day, most without the power to respond as she did. Social media exploded with personal stories. Under the hashtag #FlyingWhileBlack, thousands shared their experiences of being questioned, moved, or humiliated on flights because they didn't look the part. A famous black musician posted, "I wear a suit every time I fly first class because I'm tired of being asked if I'm in the right seat. Even then, I get questioned." At Sky Global was just caught saying the quiet part out loud. A prominent black actress added, "Gate agents have literally looked at my first-class boarding pass, then pointed me toward economy." At Sky Global. This isn't one incident, it's your culture. In the Sky Global corporate offices, the impact was immediate and devastating. As employees watched their company implode in real time, an anonymous employee leaked the code upgrade documents to major news outlets. The revelation that Sky Global had an unofficial policy of scrutinizing passengers who didn't match the premium cabin demographic sent shockwaves through the industry. Vanessa Wilson and Thomas Blackwell, now unemployed and infamous, watched in horror as their faces became the symbols of discrimination in aviation. Their names were trending, their social media accounts flooded with messages, their professional futures evaporated in a matter of hours. Captain Richard Baker retreated to his home, unplugging from the internet as he faced the end of his career. His phone continued to ring with calls from the FAA, the pilots' union, and journalists. He answered none of them. In the midst of this chaos, Elena Rodriguez sat beside Dr. Imani Reynolds on the Delta flight, helping craft what would become aviation's most transformative policy document. The Reynolds Protocol was taking shape point by point, each item addressing a specific aspect of the discriminatory culture that had been exposed. "You know," Elena said thoughtfully as they worked, "people might say you overreacted, shutting down an entire airline over one incident." Imani looked up from her laptop. "It wasn't one incident, Elena. It was the culmination of countless incidents experienced by countless passengers who didn't have the power to respond. Sometimes the only way to address a pervasive problem is with an equally powerful response. Elena nodded slowly. I used to think speaking up was enough, but watching what happened today, speaking up is essential. Imani agreed. But so is having the courage to use your power when you have it. That's why I built the fail-safe into the Nova system. Not because I expected to use it, but because I understood that sometimes leverage is necessary to force change. As they continued working, the plane crossed the Atlantic carrying not just passengers, but the blueprint for a new era in aviation equity. Meanwhile, in London, preparations were being made. Sky Global's European legal team was assembling in a conference room at the Savoy awaiting Mitchell's arrival. They had been instructed to prepare for a complete contractual overhaul and to raise no objections. The company's survival was at stake. Jackson Mitchell landed at Heathrow, stepping off the British Airways flight with the weight of his company's future heavy on his shoulders. His phone immediately lit up with dozens of missed calls and messages, each more urgent than the last. One text from his CFO stood out, stock down 42%. Major shareholders calling emergency meeting. Board considering filing for bankruptcy protection if Nova not restored within 24 hours. Mitchell took a deep breath. Tomorrow's meeting with Dr. Reynolds wasn't just about apologies or new contracts. It was about survival. By the time Dr. Imani Reynolds' flight touched down at Heathrow Airport, the aviation world had been transformed. #Sky Global Grounded was the top trending topic globally, with major news networks providing continuous coverage of the unprecedented shutdown. The financial impact was staggering. Sky Global's market capitalization had plummeted by $14 billion in just 8 hours. Analysts were openly discussing whether the airline could survive if the Nova system remained offline for more than a few days. But the conversation had expanded beyond just Sky Global. Other airlines were being forced to confront their own practices as passengers shared similar stories across carriers. Aviation industry forums buzzed with discussions about bias in premium cabins, unwritten profiling policies, and the need for structural reform. The FAA had announced an industry-wide review of passenger removal procedures, citing concerning patterns of non-safety-related removals that may indicate discriminatory practices. Airlines scrambled to issue statements reaffirming their commitment to equality and fair treatment. As Imani and Elena made their way through Heathrow, they noticed travelers pointing and whispering. The story had made Imani instantly recognizable, a symbol of empowerment against corporate discrimination. Dr. Reynolds called out a woman approaching them in the terminal. I just want to thank you for standing up. My husband and I fly first class frequently, and he never gets questioned, but I always do. She gestured to herself, a black woman in business casual attire. Your actions today mean something to all of us. Imani thanked her warmly before continuing to the exit, where a car was waiting to take them to the Savoy. Are you ready for tomorrow? Elena asked as they drove through London. More than ready, Imani replied. I've been preparing for this moment my entire career, even if I didn't know it. Back at Heathrow, Jackson Mitchell exited customs to find his European executive team waiting with grim faces. How bad is it? He asked immediately. Worse than we thought, his European operations director replied. We have over 18,000 passengers stranded across Europe alone. Rebooking is a nightmare. Competitors are price gouging, knowing we're desperate. Customer service lines are overwhelmed, and the press is camped out at every Sky Global counter in every major airport. What about the board? They've called an emergency meeting for 7 a.m. London time, before your meeting with Dr. Reynolds. They want to know exactly what you're going to offer her, and they want veto power over any agreement. Mitchell shook his head. They don't understand. We're not in a position to negotiate. Reynolds holds all the cards. The shareholders are demanding action, Jackson. Several major investors are already talking about legal action against the company for failing to protect their interests. Mitchell laughed bitterly. And what do they suggest? We can't force Reynolds to turn the system back on. We can't replace it. Nova is proprietary and integrated into every aspect of our operations. We literally cannot fly without her cooperation." As his team fell silent, the full weight of the situation settled over them. Sky Global, once a titan of the industry, had been brought to its knees by a single act of discrimination and the powerful woman who refused to accept it. At the FAA's Emergency Operations Center in Washington, Administrator Jennifer Jimenez was reviewing the Sky Global incident with growing concern. "We need to get ahead of this," she told her team. "What happened today exposes a vulnerability in our entire regulatory framework. We've focused so much on mechanical safety that we've overlooked how organizational culture impacts operational decisions. The recording from Flight 843 is particularly troubling," added the FAA's chief counsel. "Captain Baker clearly abused his authority. He made no attempt to verify the passenger's status before ordering her removal. That's not just poor judgment, it's a misuse of the safety powers we've granted to captains." Jimenez nodded. "I want a full investigation. Pull the cockpit voice recorder data from Flight 843. Interview everyone involved. And I want Captain Baker's entire command history reviewed. If this is a pattern, we need to know." "What about Reynolds Avionics and the Nova system?" asked another official. "Should we be concerned about the precedent? This sets one company essentially holding an entire airline hostage." The contract gave Reynolds Avionics the right to suspend service if the system was being operated unsafely, the chief counsel pointed out. And their definition of unsafe explicitly included organizational culture issues that impact decision-making. Legally, Dr. Reynolds is on solid ground. Besides, Jimenez added, she didn't disable safety functions. All in-air aircraft can land safely. She's just preventing new takeoffs. That's a business issue, not a safety one. As the meeting continued, the FAA team began drafting what would eventually become known as Advisory Circular 120-72F Guidelines for Non-Safety-Related Passenger Removal Procedures, a direct response to the Sky Global incident that would reshape passenger rights across the industry. At the Savoy, Imani and Elena settled into their suite and continued refining the Reynolds Protocol. The document had grown to over 20 pages, each point addressing a specific aspect of aviation equity and accountability. "Are you sure Sky Global will agree to all of this?" Elena asked, looking at the extensive requirements. "They don't have a choice," Imani replied. "But more importantly, these changes aren't punitive. They're necessary. Every item on this list addresses a real problem that affects real passengers every day." Elena nodded, then hesitated. "What about me? After all this is over, I mean." Imani smiled. "My offer stands. Reynolds Avionics would be lucky to have someone with your integrity. But first, let's finish what we started." As night fell over London, the stage was set for the next day's confrontation. In hotel rooms and conference centers across the city, the key players prepared for what would be a defining moment in aviation history. Jackson Mitchell rehearsed his apology, knowing it might not be enough. The Sky Global legal team prepared to accept whatever terms were presented. The board members debated whether to replace Mitchell as CEO, searching for a scapegoat to appease shareholders. And in her suite at the Savoy, Dr. Imani Reynolds put the finishing touches on a document that would not just resolve the current crisis, but transform an entire industry's approach to equality and respect. The Nova system remained offline, Sky Global remained grounded, and the countdown to 9 a.m. continued. At precisely 9 a.m. London time, Jackson Mitchell arrived at the Savoy, flanked by Sky Global's chief legal officer and 3 board members who had flown in overnight. Their faces were drawn, their body language tense. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a surrender. They were escorted to a conference room where Dr. Imani Reynolds sat waiting, still dressed casually but impeccably, with Elena Rodriguez beside her. No lawyers, no assistants, just the woman whose technology kept their airline in the sky and the flight attendant who had tried to prevent disaster. Mitchell stepped forward, hand extended. "Dr. Reynolds, thank you for meeting with us. I want to personally save your apologies, Jackson. Imani cut him off, not taking his hand. They're as worthless as your crew. You have a $1.4 billion hole in your stock and your entire fleet is still grounded. Save for this one aircraft that brought you here, I'd say you have a lot more to worry about than my feelings. Mitchell's hand fell to his side. What do you want? Whatever it is, it's yours. Just turn the system back on. Imani stood walking slowly around the table. What I want, Jackson, is to not be treated like a criminal when I'm trying to fly on an airline that exists in its modern form because of me. But since that's apparently too much to ask, we'll settle for this. She handed him a document, the Reynolds Protocol, Structural Reform for Aviation Equity. My lawyers will be going through this with your team point by point, she continued. It's not a negotiation. It's a statement of terms. Here are the highlights. First, you will be paying a one-time breach of partnership fee of $60 million. Mitchell flinched, but didn't argue. Furthermore, my licensing fee for the Nova system is increasing by 35%. Effective immediately for all carriers worldwide. You can explain to your competitors why their costs just went up, because your airline is staffed by bigots. 35%, one of the board members exclaimed. That's a discount, Imani finished for him. I should be revoking the license entirely. Be grateful I still see value in your company's existence. She continued. Next, you will implement a mandatory top-to-bottom bias and de-escalation training program for every single employee from the baggage handlers to the boardroom, and my firm will be designing it and auditing it. Non-negotiable. You will create a new executive position, Chief Passenger Advocate, with direct board access and veto power over any policy that impacts passenger treatment. This position will be filled by someone with demonstrated commitment to equity. Mitchell glanced at his team, then back at Imani. Is that all? Not even close. You will implement a new passenger verification protocol that requires multiple levels of confirmation before any passenger can be removed or relocated. You will create anonymous reporting channels for employees to flag discriminatory behavior without fear of retaliation. You will conduct quarterly audits of passenger removal data with specific attention to racial and gender patterns, and you will make all of this data publicly available in your annual report. Mitchell swallowed hard. Dr. Reynolds, some of these requirements may take time to... You have 30 days for full implementation, Imani stated flatly. And one more thing. The FAA hearing on Captain Baker. I'll be testifying along with Ms. Rodriguez here, who has provided comprehensive documentation of your company's unwritten profiling practices. The room fell silent as the Sky Global team absorbed the magnitude of the demands. It's done, Mitchell said finally, his voice resigned. All of it. Just please the fleet. Our passengers. Imani smiled a cold, thin smile. The fleet will be back online when the contract is signed. Every word, every clause, without modification. She turned to Elena. Ms. Rodriguez will be overseeing the implementation of the passenger verification portion of the protocol. I expect her to be treated with the utmost respect. Mitchell looked confused. Ms. Rodriguez works for us. Not anymore, Imani replied. She now works for Reynolds Avionics as our aviation equity specialist. But she'll be spending considerable time at Sky Global ensuring compliance. Elena straightened in her chair, pride evident in her posture. Now, Imani concluded, I suggest you get your legal team started on the contract review. I have a meeting at noon, and I'd like this resolved before then. As the Sky Global team huddled with their lawyers poring over the document with growing dismay, Imani and Elena stepped out of the conference room. Was that too harsh? Elena asked quietly. No, Imani replied. That was exactly what was needed. Change doesn't come from gentle suggestions. It comes from leveraging power to create new structures. Every demand in that document addresses a real problem that has affected countless passengers who didn't have the power to fight back. What about the $60 million fee? Imani smiled a genuine smile this time. That's the seed funding for a new foundation. But we'll get to that later. 3 hours later, the contract was signed. Every demand accepted without modification. As Mitchell's hand trembled over the final page, Imani took out her phone and made a call. Sophia. It's done. Restore the Nova system. Across the globe, screens began lighting up green. System after system came back online. In airports worldwide, relieved Sky Global staff watched as their terminals and equipment returned to life. Flights began boarding again. The airline had survived, but it would never be the same. Mitchell exhaled relief, flooding his features. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. Imani regarded him coolly. Don't thank me, Jackson. Just do better, because if I ever have to shut you down again, it will be permanent. As she and Elena left the Savoy, news alerts began pinging on phones worldwide. Sky Global operations restored after historic shutdown. Reynolds Avionics and Sky Global announced new partnership framework. Aviation industry braces for Reynolds Protocol implementation. The crisis was over, but the transformation was just beginning. 1 week after the Sky Global incident, Captain Richard Baker sat stiffly in a conference room at the FAA's Washington headquarters. Across from him sat Administrator Jennifer Jimenez, flanked by senior FAA officials and a staff psychologist. The mood was solemn, the atmosphere heavy with judgment. Captain Baker Jimenez began, her voice neutral, but authoritative. We've reviewed the cockpit voice recordings from Flight 843, the witness statements, and your own written account of the events. We're struggling to understand one critical point. At what specific moment did Dr. Reynolds become a safety risk justifying removal? Baker cleared his throat. My crew reported she was hostile. That's a crew coordination issue. It creates distraction. That's a safety risk. A distraction? Jimenez repeated, her face impassive. So you didn't actually see her being hostile. You just took their word for it. A captain trusts his crew. A captain leads his crew. Captain Baker. He doesn't blindly follow them. Jimenez shuffled through her papers. We have testimony from your first officer, Michael Donovan. He states that he advised you to check the manifest. He states he told you, Sir, I think that's Imani Reynolds, the Nova system designer. Is that true? Baker's blood turned to ice. His own co-pilot. He mumbled something inaudible. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? I was dealing with the situation, Baker said more clearly. You were ignoring the situation, Jimenez countered. Now let's talk about the cockpit voice recorder. We have audio of Dr. Reynolds on the jet bridge speaking to you. Let's play it. She pressed a key and the room filled with the recorded exchange, Imani's voice. I am Dr. Imani Reynolds of Reynolds Avionics. I am not a threat. I am not being disruptive. Baker's voice loud and arrogant. Reynolds Avionics never heard of it. I don't know who you think you are, but on this plane, my word is law. Get her off my plane now. Jimenez stopped the recording. The silence in the room was deafening. You never heard of it, Jimenez said, her voice dripping with contempt. You were flying a $200 million aircraft whose entire navigational and safety system was designed by the woman you were shouting at. You didn't just fail to de-escalate, Captain. You demonstrated a catastrophic lack of situational awareness. You showed zero curiosity, zero investigation, and 100% pure, unadulterated arrogance. You used your command authority, a power given to you to save lives, as a hammer to win a petty argument. The psychologist chimed in. Your profile, Captain, suggests a classic authority complex. You were presented with conflicting information, and instead of processing it, you defaulted to aggression. You were not a captain in that moment. You were a bully. Baker's face burned with humiliation. He wanted to argue to defend himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. He had failed, not just as a captain, but as a human being. The verdict was swift and brutal. Captain Richard Baker's commercial pilot's license was suspended indefinitely. His career as an airline pilot was over. In one 5-minute interaction, he had vaporized 30 years of experience. Meanwhile, at Sky Global's headquarters, the implementation of the Reynolds Protocol was proceeding at breakneck speed. Every employee from the baggage handlers to the C-suite was being cycled through new training programs. The company's policies were being rewritten from the ground up, with Elena Rodriguez overseeing each change to ensure it addressed the root issues. The financial penalty had been severe. In addition to the $60 million breach fee, the 35% increase in Nova system licensing had required immediate rate adjustments across the board. Passengers were unhappy with the sudden fare increases, but the alternative, a grounded airline, was worse. Jackson Mitchell called an all-hands meeting to address the changes. Standing before thousands of employees in person and via video link, he didn't mince words. What happened on Flight 843 was a failure at every level of our organization, he began. From our unwritten profiling practices to our failure to verify information, from our misuse of captain's authority to our lack of accountability mechanisms, we failed. But more importantly, we failed the thousands of passengers who have experienced similar treatment but lacked Dr. Reynolds' power to respond. He continued, "The Reynolds Protocol isn't a punishment. It's a roadmap to becoming the airline we should have been all along. One where every passenger is treated with dignity, where verification replaces assumption, where bias is confronted rather than enabled." Throughout the company, reactions were mixed. Some employees resented the changes, viewing them as an overreaction to a single incident. Others, particularly employees of color who had witnessed or experienced similar treatment, felt vindicated. One flight attendant's comment during a training session captured the divide. "I understand we need to be fair, but we also need to be vigilant. Some passengers really don't belong in first class." The trainer, a black woman with 20 years of experience, responded pointedly. "And who decides who belongs? Based on what criteria? Their clothes, their skin color, their accent. That's exactly the kind of thinking that cost this company $1.4 billion and nearly destroyed it." The FAA, meanwhile, was using the Sky Global incident as a catalyst for industry-wide reform. New guidelines were issued requiring airlines to document and justify all non-safety-related passenger removals. Training requirements for captains were updated to emphasize verification and de-escalation. And throughout the industry, airlines began quietly reviewing their own practices, hoping to avoid becoming the next Sky Global. Delta, American, United all implemented versions of the Reynolds Protocol before being required to recognizing the writing on the wall. 2 weeks after the incident, a press release went out that caught the aviation world by surprise. Dr. Imani Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Avionics, would be holding a press conference at the National Air and Space Museum to make a major announcement. The press conference was packed. Journalists from major networks and aviation publications filled the room, cameras trained on the empty podium. At exactly noon, Dr. Imani Reynolds walked onto the stage, followed by Elena Rodriguez and Sofia Alvarez. Unlike the casual attire she had worn on the fateful flight today, Imani was dressed in a tailored navy suit projecting the power and authority that had always been hers, regardless of how she dressed. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice clear and confident. 2 weeks ago, I was removed from a Sky Global flight because I didn't look the part of a first-class passenger. That incident exposed not just individual bias, but a culture of discrimination that has been allowed to flourish in our skies. The room was silent, reporters hanging on every word. Today, I'm not here to revisit that incident. I'm here to announce what will come from it. She paused, scanning the room. I'm proud to announce the creation of the Nova Foundation for Women in STEM, with an initial endowment of $60 million provided by Sky Global Airlines. Murmurs rippled through the audience. This foundation will provide scholarships, mentorships, and grants for Black, Latina, and other minority women pursuing careers in aerospace engineering and computer science. Because for too long we have been told we don't look the part. We have been told to wait our turn. We have been told we don't belong in first class in the cockpit or in the boardroom. Her voice grew stronger, more passionate. This foundation is not about asking for a seat at the table. It's about building a better table. It's about funding the next generation of women who will not just design the systems, but own them. Women who will enter spaces not as guests requiring permission, but as architects of the future who belong anywhere their talents take them. The room erupted in applause, cameras flashing as reporters captured the moment. Additionally, Imani continued as the applause died down. I'm pleased to announce that Elena Rodriguez, formerly of Sky Global, has been appointed as the Foundation's first Director of Aviation Equity Programs. Ms. Rodriguez will be developing initiatives to increase diversity in aviation and to create pathways for underrepresented groups to enter the field. Elena stepped forward, smiling, as Imani handed her the microphone. Thank you, Dr. Reynolds. As someone who witnessed firsthand the impact of bias in aviation, I'm honored to be part of the solution. Our first initiative will be the Flight Path program, providing full scholarships for women of color to obtain pilot certifications, addressing the severe underrepresentation in cockpits across the industry. The announcement dominated news cycles for days. The Nova Foundation was hailed as a transformative force in both STEM education and aviation equity. Applications for scholarships flooded in from across the country, overwhelming the newly formed staff. Sky Global, for its part, embraced the association with the foundation, using it as evidence of their commitment to reform. Jackson Mitchell appeared at the foundation's first fundraising gala, pledging ongoing support and announcing that Sky Global would prioritize hiring Nova Foundation graduates. The aviation industry watched these developments with a mixture of admiration and trepidation. The message was clear: adapt to a new era of accountability or face the consequences. For Thomas Blackwell and Vanessa Wilson, the aftermath was less positive. Blacklisted from major airlines, they struggled to find employment in the industry they had dedicated their careers to. Their names and faces had become synonymous with the kind of discrimination the Reynolds Protocol sought to eliminate. Vanessa eventually found work at a regional airline, starting over at entry level despite her years of experience. Thomas left aviation entirely, taking a customer service position at a hotel chain where, ironically, he was required to complete bias training as part of his orientation. Meanwhile, the FAA investigation into Sky Global's practices had expanded, uncovering a pattern of discriminatory passenger removals that confirmed Elena's initial revelations. The airline was fined an additional $25 million for civil rights violations, with the money directed to a passenger compensation fund. Captain Richard Baker's professional decline continued. His appeal of the license suspension was denied, with the review board citing a pattern of authority abuse and failure to follow verification protocols. At 54, with no prospect of flying commercially again, he was forced to reinvent himself. The ultimate karma found him 18 months later. He was broke, his reputation in tatters. He was trying to get his prop plane certification back just so he could teach tourists at a small municipal airfield in Florida. He was in a tiny, rattling Cessna 172 with a 23-year-old instructor named Kyle. "Okay, Richard, let's try the landing again," Kyle said, sighing. "You're coming in too hot. You're flaring too late. You're still flying it like a 787. The rudder is soft." Baker barked, his old authority flaring up. "The controls are fine, Richard. You're just a bad pilot." Kyle banked the plane sharply, taking control. "Now shut up. You listen and do it again. Or you can get out and walk." The man who had once commanded the skies, who had looked down on Dr. Imani Reynolds, was now 2,000 feet above a swamp, being told to shut up by a kid in cargo shorts. He shut up and did it again. When Dr. Imani Reynolds landed at JFK 2 years after the incident, the airport looked the same but felt entirely different. The Sky Global terminal, once a symbol of the discrimination she had faced, now displayed a large banner, proud partner of the Nova Foundation, committed to equity in the skies. She smiled at the irony as she walked through the terminal. Her Nova system was still powering Sky Global's operations, now under the strict guidelines of the Reynolds Protocol. The airline had not only survived, but had become an industry leader in diversity and inclusion practices, not by choice, but by necessity. As she reached the baggage claim area, a young woman approached her hesitantly. "Dr. Reynolds, I'm sorry to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you." Imani smiled warmly. "You're not bothering me at all. And you are Gabriela Mendez. I'm a first-year Nova Foundation scholar. I'm studying aerospace engineering at MIT. She gestured to her Sky Global uniform. "And I'm working part-time as a gate agent to get industry experience. It's wonderful to meet you, Gabriela. How are you finding both experiences?" "Challenging but amazing," Gabriela replied enthusiastically. "The Foundation support has changed my life. And here at Sky Global, they've implemented so many changes. We have strict verification protocols now, and all gate agents are required to complete monthly bias training." "What happened to you?" "It couldn't happen today." Imani nodded, genuinely pleased. "That's exactly what we wanted to achieve. Not just punishment, but real lasting change." As they continued chatting, Imani spotted a familiar face across the terminal. Elena Rodriguez was walking towards them, no longer in a flight attendant uniform, but dressed in a sharp business suit, her Nova Foundation pin prominently displayed. Imani Elena called out, embracing her. "I didn't know you were coming to New York today. Last-minute meeting with some potential Foundation partners," Imani explained. "I see you've met one of our scholars." Elena beamed at Gabriela. "One of our stars. She's doing amazing work both academically and here at the airline." "I was just telling Dr. Reynolds about the changes," Gabriela said. "Speaking of changes," Elena added, "guess who's being considered for the new Chief Passenger Advocate position at Sky Global? They're finally replacing the interim person." "You," Imani guessed, smiling. Elena nodded. "Jackson Mitchell called me himself. Said my work with the Foundation and my first-hand experience make me the perfect candidate." "Well deserved," Imani said sincerely. "No one has fought harder for these changes than you have." As they walked toward the exit, Imani reflected on the transformation that had rippled through the industry. The Reynolds Protocol had been adopted by every major carrier either voluntarily or through FAA mandate. Passenger removal data was now tracked, analyzed, and publicly reported, with clear patterns of improvement across the board. The Nova Foundation had grown beyond her wildest expectations, now supporting over 500 women of color in aviation and STEM fields. Its graduates were already beginning to change the face of the industry, one cockpit, one engineering department, one executive suite at a time. And Reynolds Avionics had thrived, its reputation enhanced rather than damaged by the stand its CEO had taken. 6 months after the Sky Global incident, Imani had sold the company to a defense and aerospace giant, BAE Systems, in a deal valued at $5.2 billion. Her point was made. Her work was done. Now she focused her energy entirely on the Nova Foundation, building a legacy that would far outlast the memory of that day on Flight 843. "You know," Elena said thoughtfully as they reached the curb, "I sometimes think about Vanessa and Thomas and Captain Baker. Do you ever wonder what happened to them?" "I don't need to wonder," Imani replied. "Their fate was determined by their own actions, not my response to them. The consequences they faced weren't punishment, they were accountability. And Sky Global, they're doing what corporations do, adapting to survive. The difference is, they're now adapting in a direction that benefits everyone, not just those who look the part." As her car arrived, Imani turned to Gabriela one last time. "Keep excelling, Gabriela. Your presence in this industry is more powerful than you know." With that, she stepped into the car, leaving behind an airport transformed not by architecture or technology, but by a fundamental shift in who belonged and who decided. The true power wasn't about the uniform you wore or the seat you were assigned. It was about knowing your value so completely that when someone tried to take it, you could, with a single phone call, take their entire world away instead. That right there is a story of hard karma. It shows us that prejudice and arrogance, especially from people in positions of power, aren't just ugly, they're expensive. Vanessa Wilson. Thomas Blackwell and Captain Baker thought they were just putting a difficult woman in her place. They had no idea they were poking a giant. Dr. Imani Reynolds taught them and the entire airline a lesson. Your title, your uniform, and your privilege mean nothing when confronted by someone who built the very system you rely on. What do you think? Was Imani's response too harsh, or was it exactly what was needed? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love stories where the bully gets exactly what they have coming, do me a favor. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that bell. You don't want to miss the next story of justice served that I'll be bringing you next week. And if you've ever experienced discrimination while traveling, share your story in the comments. Your voice matters, and together we can create change, one story, one action, one system at a time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.